In the year 2000, Jan de Keyser was 47 years old. He drove a red Volvo FH12, a truck he'd owned since 1995, and was known as the best driver at his transport company in Antwerp. His wife, Annelies, worked as a nurse at St. Luke's Hospital in Ghent. Their son, Tom, studied at KU Leuven University, and their daughter Lise was preparing for her final school exams. They lived in a modest two-story brick house with a small garden and a Flemish flag by the front step. Life was calm, predictable, and good. Then in March 2000, the company took on a new contract, delivering spare parts and food supplies to the Lofoten Islands. The pay was 2.5 times higher because hardly anyone was willing to drive there in winter. Jan did the math. With this route, he could pay off the mortgage in 5 or 6 years and retire at 55. Annelies kissed him on the cheek and packed his travel bag with homemade waffles and a thermos of strong coffee. His first trip was in April 2000. He took the ferry from Hirtshals to Bergen, then drove north on the E10 all the way to Rhein, a quiet fishing village tucked deep into a fjord. Unloading at a small fish processing plant, Jan wandered into a tiny bar called Roerbua, a red wooden cabin on stilts over the water. Inside sat 3 women from the night shift, Siv, Turid, and Britt. They were drinking coffee and eating cinnamon buns. No aquavit for them, they had to be back at work by 5 the next morning. Jan spoke Flemish. They spoke Norwegian. They communicated through a bulky Nokia 3310 translation app and hand gestures. He showed them photos of Annelies and the children. They showed him pictures of red Roerbua, traditional fishermen's cabins, and the northern lights. They laughed. Turid handed him a pair of knitted woolen mittens. "It's -20 here. Belgians freeze fast." He thanked her and left them a bar of Côte d'Or chocolate. And so a quiet tradition began. Every 3 or 4 weeks, Jan returned, and they were always waiting. They brought smoked cod. He brought chocolate, Westmalle beer, and Belgian cheese. It was all friendly, just camaraderie. Until the winter of 2000-2001. In December 2000, a storm blew in and closed the mountain passes for 3 days. The factory shut down. Jan stayed in his cab, keeping warm with the diesel engine running. Then Siv knocked on his window. "Come to Turid's. The stove is lit. We'll sleep on the floor." He refused twice. On the 3rd knock, he went. They drank glögg, mulled wine Turid made with cloves and cardamom. The next morning, Jan woke up in the same bed as Turid. Siv slept on the sofa. Britt was on a mattress by the stove. Without a word, he dressed and slipped out and stayed in his truck for 2 full days. When the storm cleared, he drove away without saying goodbye. All the way to Denmark, he cursed himself with every breath. Back home, Annelies greeted him with an apple pie and asked, "Was it cold up there?" He nodded and hugged her so tightly she was surprised. That night, he swore to himself, never again. But a month later, a new shipment came in. A bonus. The mortgage. And he went back. And it happened again, not from drunkenness this time, not by accident, but knowingly. He hated himself, but he kept returning, because up there, 3 women in their 40s waited for him. And they had no one else. By spring 2001, he stayed a week, then 2. In summer 2001, he saw them first in light summer dresses on the dock. Ordinary bodies, ordinary faces, nothing extraordinary, just warmth. Then in September 2001, Turid spoke first, "I'm pregnant." Siv and Britt bought tests the next day,
3 lines. Jan sat in Turid's kitchen, staring at the plastic sticks, unable to breathe. He was 48. They were between 44 and 48. It was impossible. But the tests didn't lie. They remained calm. They made tea and said, "We won't hold you here, Jan. If you stay and help raise them, good. If you don't, we won't blame you." He left without a word. All the way back to Belgium, he got sick at rest stops. At home, Annelies welcomed him as always. He lay in bed for a week, claiming he had a bad flu. She brought him soup, checked his fever, worried. He stared at the ceiling and realized he had betrayed everything he believed in. But the mortgage. So he went north again. Winter 2001-2002, Jan had lost count of how many times he'd crossed Scandinavia. His new Nokia 6110 stayed switched off whenever he was in rain. Annelies called every evening at 8:30 p.m., right when the Flemish soap opera Familia began. He only answered from rest stops in Sweden or Denmark. The cargoes delayed, transmission trouble, blizzard on the pass. She believed him. 25 years together, that bond ran deeper than any lie detector. Meanwhile, in rain, bellies began to show. Turid carried the largest, 1 boy, the ultrasound confirmed. Siv and Britt were expecting girls. They went together to prenatal appointments in Svolvær, crammed into Turid's old Toyota Hilux. Jan sat in the waiting room, wearing a knitted hat Britt had made for him, flipping through Fiskaren, a local fishing magazine. The nurses gave him curious looks, but said nothing. In the north, people respect secrets. He bought baby clothes in Tromsø and hid them in a storage container at the factory. He transferred nearly all his salary to Turid's bank account. Back home, Annelies smiled. "Finally, we'll pay off the house." He nodded and slept in the garage, claiming back pain. On March 17, 2002, Turid gave birth. A boy, 4,120 grams. His cry could be heard out on the street. They named him Lars. Jan stood in the hospital hallway in Svolvær, chain-smoking cigarettes, though he'd quit 10 years earlier. When a nurse came out and said, "Congratulations, Dad," he nodded, then rushed to the bathroom to be sick. 5 months later, on August 9, 2002, Siv gave birth to Ing, 3,380 grams. A difficult labor. They used a vacuum extractor. Jan held her hand and whispered in Flemish, "Breathe, darling, breathe." She didn't understand the words, but she understood his voice. 3 weeks after that, on August 30, 2002, Britt delivered Marta, 3,550 grams, an easy birth. She even laughed between contractions. On all 3 birth certificates, the father's name was left blank. That was their decision. Jan could have signed, but it would have meant divorce, court in Ghent, alimony, and shame in front of the whole neighborhood. He wasn't ready for that. From 2003 to 2008, Jan lived 2 lives. In Ghent, he was the loving husband and father who brought home gifts and told stories about the northern lights. In Rain, he was the man who arrived every 4 weeks, stayed with each of the 3 women in turn, brought milk and diapers, and taught Lars to ride a bike without training wheels.
The children grew. Lars called him Papa John. The girls called him Uncle John. He taught them Flemish words, dankje, thank you, lekker, delicious, papa. They giggled and repeated them. Annelies sensed something was wrong. He grew quiet, distant. He stopped holding her at night. In 2006, he found a Norwegian baby pacifier in his jacket pocket. He said, "A driver from Luxembourg asked me to pass it along." She nodded, but her eyes had already changed. In 2008, Laura started school. John came to the first day of class, standing quietly in the back in a knitted sweater. The teacher asked, "Are you the grandfather?" He replied, "No, the father." The classroom fell silent. Then slowly, they got used to it. By 2010, the children knew the truth. Lars asked him plainly, "Why don't you live with us like other dads?" He answered, "Because I have another family far away." Lars nodded and never asked again. In 2012, Annalise found photos on an old phone John had forgotten in his desk drawer. One showed Lars on a potty, captioned, "Papa send good, Daddy's boy." That night she woke him, placed the phone on the bed and asked softly, "Who are these children, John?" He was silent long. Then he told her everything, from December 2000 to that very day. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she got up, went to the bathroom, and locked the door. The water ran all night. At 6 in the morning, she came out and said, "Leave, right now." He walked out in his pajamas and slippers, got in his car, and drove north. 2,400 kilometers, no stops. John crossed the Norwegian border on October 14, 2012 in an old Opel Astra he bought from a coworker for cash. In the trunk, 2 suitcases, a toolbox, and a photo from his wedding to Annalise in 1976. At customs, he asks quietly, "Can I stay for my children?" The border officer looked at him, at his passport, at his trembling hands, and simply nodded. "Vakumen." He arrived in rain at 8 that evening. Rain fell in sheets. Turret opened the door, saw his soaked face, and understood immediately. Lars, now 10, burst into the hallway in shark print pajamas, shouting, "Papa Blahim, Daddy's staying home." The girls ran out behind him. John sank to his knees in the kitchen, wrapped his arms around all 3, and for the first time in 12 years, cried in front of others. The next day, he went to a lawyer in Swover. "I want to legally recognize my children and stay here forever." The lawyer, a woman named Ragnhild, about 50, listened without surprise. First, divorce in Belgium, then paternity acknowledgement, then a residence permit for family reunification, minimum 2 years. Annalise filed for divorce herself. The court letter from Ghent arrived in January 2013. She asked for nothing, not the house, not his pension, not alimony, only that he never returned to Ghent. The judge finalized the divorce in a single hearing on March 8, 2013. 37 years of marriage ended in 15 minutes. John sold his share of the house. Annalise refused the money. It all went to Tom and Lise. He sent every crown he could scrape together to their accounts. They returned it with a note, "Not needed." He never wrote again. In May 2013, he officially recognized Lars, Inga, and Marta. Their birth certificates now bore the surname De Keyser alongside their mother's names. The children received double surnames. At school, the teacher stopped whispering.
He rented a small red warboo on the edge of rain. 2 rooms, a kitchen, a wood stove. He took a job driving a delivery van for the fish plant, hauling fresh catch to nearby islands in an old Volkswagen transporter. His pay was 1/3 of what he'd earned on international runs, but for the first time in 20 years, he slept at home every night. The years 2013 to 2015 were the calmest of his life. Mornings, school drop-offs. Days, deliveries. Evenings, cooking fiskesuppa, or fish soup, and klippfisk, or dried cod. Helping with homework, reading fairy tales about Askeladen. Weekends, all 5 of them, fishing or hiking in the mountains. Lars was taller than his shoulders now. Inga played flute. Marta drew the northern lights. Siv, Turid, and Britt didn't live with him. They each had their own homes, but they came every evening, bringing food, sitting by the stove, drinking coffee. Sometimes one stayed the night. They didn't envy each other. They shared him the way people share the last loaf of bread in hard times. In 2015, Jan received permanent residency. At the town hall, they handed him a document and a small Norwegian flag. He hung the flag above his warboudour and smiled, genuinely, for the first time in years. Then, in spring 2016, a letter came from Ghent. Annelies had died. Pancreatic cancer. Fast. Tom wrote briefly, "Funeral on Saturday. Don't come." Jan bought a ticket to Brussels, drove to Bodo Airport, sat in the departure hall for 4 hours, then boarded the plane back home. In Rain's little wooden church, he lit a candle and asked forgiveness, in Flemish and in Norwegian. After that, he aged overnight. His hair turned fully white, his back bent. The children noticed. They began calling him Gammel Papa, or Old Dad. He didn't mind. That summer, Lars finished primary school. At the ceremony, Jan sat in the front row in his only suit. When Lars walked up to receive his certificate, Jan stood and clapped, alone at first. People turned to stare. Then, they got used to it. After Annelies's death, Jan stopped sleeping. He sat on the Warbu porch at night, smoking a pipe, though he'd quit in 2004, staring at the fjord. The water was black as his conscience. Sometimes Lars would join him in pajamas, sitting in silence. At 14, the boy was already taller than his father, but still held his hand when no one was looking. In 2017, Turid was diagnosed with breast cancer. It had started as a small lump she'd ignored for 2 years. Stage 3. Metastases in the lymph nodes. Jan sold his old Volvo FH12, the one he'd kept in the garage as a memory, and paid for her treatment at the university hospital in Tromsø. Chemo, surgery, radiation. Turid lost her hair, dropped to 47 kilos. Lars shaved his head bald, so Mom won't feel ashamed. Jan carried her to the bath, fed her spoonfuls of broth, read the newspaper aloud. At night, while she slept on morphine, he held her hand. The treatment brought remission for 18 months. In summer 2018, they all went to Vesterålen Island. Turid in a scarf, Lars teaching his sisters to set fishing nets, Jan grilling fresh halibut over an open fire. For a moment, it seemed things might be okay. But in February 2019, the cancer returned, now in her liver and bones. The doctors were clear. Months, not years. Turid asked to go home, to Rain. Jan converted the living room into a bedroom, placed the hospital bed by the window so she could see the sea. She died on May 29, 2019, at 4 in the morning. The sun no longer set this far north. It was already daylight. Lars slept on a mattress beside her. Jan held her hand. Turid opened her eyes one last time, looked at her son, and whispered, "Take vara på pappa, guten min. Take care of Daddy, my boy." Then she turned to Jan, "Tack för allt. Thank you for everything." And then, that was it. The whole village came to the funeral. Her red coffin was lowered into the ground beside her first husband, a fisherman. Lars stood straight as a soldier, not crying. Only when the first clump of earth hit the lid did he drop to his knees and howl so loudly the birds took flight from rooftops. After the funeral, Lars moved in with Jan for good. 15 years old, 185 centimeters tall, voice breaking. He screamed in his sleep, stayed silent by day. Jan took him to a therapist in Svolvær and went himself. The therapist said, "You both have PTSD and survivor's guilt." Jan just nodded. He already knew. Siv and Britt came every day. Siv cooked, Britt washed and ironed school shirts. The girls, now 13, helped around the house but started pushing back. "Why don't we have a normal family like everyone else?" Jan had no answer. In 2019, Jan became a Norwegian citizen. At the town hall, they gave him a passport and a small bouquet of wildflowers. He put the passport in a drawer and never opened it again. By late 2019, Lars had quit football, started smoking weed behind the school, and once came home drunk. For the first time in his life, Jan raised a hand, not in anger, but open-palmed once. Then he sank to the floor and sobbed. Lars hugged him. They both cried. From that day on, they never shouted at each other again. Jan took a night watchman job at the fish plant. Quiet work, room to think. He slept 3 hours a day, picked up the girls from school, cooked dinner, checked homework. His hair was all white now, his back curved, but he held on because he had to. In March 2020, Norway shut down, the first in Europe. Ferries canceled, schools went online. The plant in Norwegian operated only 3 days a week. Jan, Lars, Inge, and Marte were locked inside their tiny red rorbu at the edge of the world. Outside, the polar night had ended, but the world still felt dark. At first, it was almost a blessing. For the first time in 20 years, they were all together, every morning, every evening. Jan baked waffles using Annalise's recipe. Lars fixed the roof. The girls attended Zoom classes. Evenings, old VHS movies, card games, baking bread. Jan taught them Flemish words he nearly forgotten. Liefje, schat, thuis, home. Lars wrote them in a notebook. But by May, the walls began to close in. Lars was 16. He wanted friends, a girlfriend, freedom. The girls, now 14, were dealing with first periods, first fights, and tears over why everyone else has normal moms and dads, but we have 3 moms and 1 dad who only lives with us because 1 mom died. He heard it through the wall and went to smoke on the dock, though he'd quit pipes last year. In June 2020, borders reopened, but Reina remained an island. No tourists, almost no work. Jan lived on unemployment and child benefits, enough for food and electricity. Lars got a summer job on a fishing boat. He came home tanned with his first wages and the smell of freedom. Then, at 2 a.m. on August 2020, Britt called. Her voice trembled. "Jan, come quickly." She'd had a stroke. He grabbed the keys, woke Lars, and they raced through mountain passes. Britt lay on her kitchen floor, right side paralyzed, speech gone. The ambulance took her to Svolvær Hospital. Diagnosis: massive brain hemorrhage. Doctors gave her 1 to 2 days to live.